3 years, 3 operational tours, 3 medals, 3 amazing opportunities to discover what true high performance looks and feels like. I was following terrorists around, and then I was running agents, working undercover, and just trying to keep our country safe, mate. And I did that for 15 years. That's what makes teams really, really special. So ultimately, I was given an ultimatum by my former employer. I carried an unlocked box of trauma around with me for about 10 years.
This is the Leeds Business Podcast, and I'm your host, Phil Fraser. Today, we have the most amazing guest in Mike Bates. Mike is an ex-counter-terrorism operations leader turned entrepreneur, public speaker and venturer. Mike talks all about his learnings from 20 years in the Royal Marines and counter-terrorism, what high performance looks like, the benefit of hot debriefs, the power of trust, and so much more. You have to listen to this episode. It's unlike any we've done before. The business surgery segment answers the question, I'm struggling with giving feedback to my team. Any suggestions? Before we start, I have one simple request. Please hit the follow or subscribe button on the app that you're listening on. Thank you. Okay, so let's get into what is a unique episode. On today's Leeds Business Podcast, I am absolutely delighted to introduce you to Mike Bates. Mike, good afternoon.
Afternoon, Phil. How are you?
I'm good. Now, if I was to introduce you as the owner of a small jiu-jitsu studio in Roundhay, that would A, be true, but B, slightly underselling you, wouldn't it?
Slightly misleading. That's one of the many things that I do. Yes.
Right. Okay. Before we dig into that, we've got our sponsor's message that I need to tell everybody about. Today's podcast is brought to you in association with Leeds-based YFM Equity Partners. YFM offer investments from £2 to £15 million, specifically to fast-growing businesses, as well as providing the resources and expertise needed to take your business to the next level. So if you're an entrepreneur with a vision for growth, whether you're expanding your market or scaling operations, YFM can help you turn your ambitions for your business into reality. Now, I'm not just saying this about YFM. If you want to hear what YFM are really like, have a listen to the recent episode with Adam Oldfield at Force 24 and episode 23 with Zandra Moore from Pan Intelligence. Both of them have equity investments from YFM. And in both episodes, they talk all about how good YFM are. So give those a listen if you are interested. And if you're looking to find out more details from YFM, you can find it at yfmep.com. That address is also at the top of the show notes. And when you do contact YFM, make sure you tell them that Phil from Leeds Business Podcast sent you. So, Mike, let's just go back to underselling you as a jiu-jitsu studio owner. Officially, you are a former counter-terrorism operations leader turned entrepreneur and venturer, which is accurate and very, very impressive. Now, I've heard you talk. Former counter-terrorism operations leader. For mere mortals like me and my listeners, that's top secret undercover stuff, isn't it?
Well, I wouldn't be allowed to answer that question.
Because it's top secret.
It's both accurate and vague. And that's the way that it has to be, unfortunately. Yeah. I mean, I know we'll dig into all this, but I did spend 20 years serving our country. First in the Royal Marines and then 15 years in the intelligence and security fields of the Ministry of Defence in the aftermath of 7/7 and 9/11. So a lot of operational experience. What I will say, this is a business podcast, but I am new to business, so I'm here to learn as much as I am to give.
Fantastic. Okay, so let's go all the way back. How'd you get into the Royal Marines?
Well, I come from a broken home in Doncaster. I said when you heard me speak, mate, there's nothing special about me. I'm eldest of 3 kids, and I think it was a challenging upbringing not having a dad, and it left a big hole in my life. At age 19, I was off the rails and searching for, like many of us are at that age, something to connect to. You know, asking myself the kind of questions, well, am I going to leave my mark in the world? Who really am I? And for whatever reason, I don't know, the military appealed. And I'll tell a story. I met a guy and he said, if you're going to join the military, you have to join the Royal Marines because all I've ever seen them do is fire guns off the back of ships and chase women around. I thought that, as a 19-year-old man, that is the perfect career. So I joined the Royal Marines age 20, and it was really, like I say, to try and find a community, Phil, to try and find belonging, because I just didn't have that growing up in Doncaster.
Okay. So, I mean, the Royal Marines is top level stuff. You're not just a sort of square bashing squaddy, are you? How does one get into the Royal Marines?
Well, back then it was a pretty arduous process, a potential Royal Marines course where you go to Lympstone, get thrashed for 3 days, and if you're still standing, they might invite you back. There's all the medicals and the getting fit. And you're right, it's the hardest, most arduous, longest basic military training in the world, the commando course, 30 weeks. I think it's 32 weeks now, only because they brought in things like computer courses, which back then, 25 years ago, didn't even exist, right? And I was lucky. I mean, I absolutely loved it. And I was in training when 9/11 happened. So I was deployed to Afghanistan as the first conventional British troops almost immediately after leaving training in 2002.
Wow. Just we'll get onto that in 1 second. So what do you think you learned through Royal Marines training? I mean, obviously you learned a lot through your career after that, but what did that 30 weeks teach you, do you think? What did that get into that 20-year-old kid from Doncaster?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that we are much more capable than we think that we are. And ultimately, that's what the course is designed to do. It's designed to break you down. It's designed to present challenges in front of you which you feel at the time are insurmountable, but then you achieve them. And it teaches you that anything really is possible. It also teaches you that, you can't be an island. You've got to work together. I always say nothing good happens alone. And that was the first time, having been alone as a child, that was the first time I really understood the power of collective effort. And also that shared sense of adversity. I think that's what connects the military, elite sport, amazing businesses. When you go through difficult things with people, it creates some of the most unbreakable bonds. And that's the kind of thing I've taken into my business life as I've progressed through my career.
Yeah, just 3 learnings there, which are all totally relevant to business. So you've been broken down, you've been built back up by the Royal Marines, and then immediately they send you back to Afghanistan. What was that like?
It's going to sound like a bizarre answer, but it was amazing. I joined as a young man to serve and to soldier and to get amongst it. And we were sent out as the first, as I say, conventional British troops to Afghanistan early 2002. It was all over the news. It was a huge deal, if anyone can remember that far back, on the front page of every paper most days whilst we were there. And we were there with one mission, Phil, and that was to find a guy called Osama bin Laden. We didn't find him, but we blew all his caves up in the Tora Bora region, the high mountains between Afghanistan and Pakistan. And you know what, mate? It was a phenomenal, formative experience. When we flew in, we were told by the Americans who just arrived that you couldn't go out into the mountains for more than 3 days because the Taliban were there. They were dug in, and they were killing all the Americans. 3 days. Our first deployment to the mountains was for 43 days before we came back. And I got to witness firsthand some of the most remarkable leadership from people who commanded respect, not because they were tough guys. And that this is the kind of thing that people perhaps don't understand about the Marines, particularly with the military. It's not the tough guys that you follow, it's the guys that care about you follow. And there were some really amazing men that taught me the true art of leadership, and I'll be forever grateful to them for that.
It's interesting you say that, because I was listening to somebody only yesterday who was talking about leadership should start from caring. So caring about your team and caring about what happens and all that sort of thing. And you saw that firsthand. And again, business lesson from military.
You've got to lead with empathy, and you've got to, leadership is all about you. I'm sure we'll get into this. It's all about you, and it's absolutely nothing about you. It's about unlocking the hidden potential in others, and quite often leading from the shadows, not leading out in front. And I think that's a key skill that all leaders should have, certainly the ones that you would follow not only into the boardroom but in the battlefield as well.
Okay, and I don't want to minimise all the stuff you did in Afghanistan. So how long you were out there, and what sort of happened after that? How did your career develop from there?
Yeah, so 6 months in Afghanistan, I came back, had 12 weeks leave. I got called into the commanding officer's office. I'd only been at Royal Marine at this point 11 months. And I was promoted to Lance Corporal, which at the time was unheard of. Like, no one got promoted until they'd done about 4 or 5 years. But he just said, you've just got a natural ability to command your peers. He was a young commanding officer. He was looking for people with the natural ability to lead, and he saw something in me. I now know, of course, that I'd actually been leading since I was 10 years old when my dad left, when I was navigating that divorce, my brother and sister, caring for my mom and everything else. So leadership came natural to me. And then, we got the call again in 2003, deployed to Iraq for the war, supporting special forces in the Western Desert, trying to find the WMDs that didn't exist. But that again was a phenomenal experience, working as a detached unit this time with the SAS and the SBS, and commanding men for the first time. And, leadership isn't about how long you've done. It's, again, how much you care and how good you are as a leader. And I had people in my section who'd done 15 years as a Marine, 8 years, 4 years. I'd done 11 months and I was taking them to war. So again, great responsibility, but great opportunity. 6 months in Iraq, came home, got the call again. 6 months in Northern Ireland. So 3 years, 3 operational tours, 3 medals, 3 amazing opportunities to discover what true high performance looks and feels like, because it does feel different in high performing environments, and the art of leadership. And I'm eternally grateful to the Royal Marines for giving me that opportunity.
Okay, this might sound like a simple question, but a complicated one. What does high performance look like?
I think it feels a certain way. I think I've got my own framework for high performance, and it's something I call my 4 Bs. You've got to be a community, not a crowd. And communities are different to crowds. They look and feel very different. And the reason they're different, and we'll get into this again, I'm sure, is communities survive with trust. And without trust, you can never have high performance. So you've got to be a community, not a crowd. You've got to be on a mission together. In the military, there is no room for error. Lives are lost. So you've got to be aligned behind a mission. You've got to be unselfish. So you've got to put other people first. And again, that builds trust. And trust is the glue that keeps teams together when times are tough. And you've got to be the change you want to see. That was one of the things that the Royal Marines were really good at, is there was no egos. It was a flat hierarchy, and special forces working exactly the same way. No one's got a monopoly on the best ideas. And in business, it's the same. Quite often people look to the CEO or the MD for all the answers. Guess what? They're winging it most of the time. And it could be the newest person to your team that has the best idea that'll move your business forward. But here's the thing, Phil, unless you've built a community of trust amongst your people, they won't put their hand up and offer you that suggestion. And so great high-performing teams have this culture where everyone adds value and everyone turns up authentically and delivers behind that mission.
You're so right with that, particularly that everybody's winging it. I spent years and years and years with this fear that somebody's going to find out I actually don't know what I'm doing. And I think a lot of business leaders are like that. And it's part of what I offer as my service now as a business sounding board. It is lonely at the top, and you do need help from other people, particularly people from the outside. But the other point you made, and we did this on our team, was you have to generate a culture where anybody can chuck an idea in. And we always used to have everybody in every meeting. Well, not every meeting, because the simplest idea will usually come from the person who's at the coalface rather than the person sitting in the boardroom. And I guess you get the same in the army. Sorry, the Royal Marines.
Thank you, mate. We talked about that off air. No, you're absolutely right. And one of the things that the military does really well is they have hot debriefs. So after every mission, before you go clean your rifle, before you go get a shower, before you decompress, everyone in the team comes together. And this used to happen in my previous career as well, running covert operations. And you just have an open conversation. Okay, what did we do really well? What worked well there? What did we do? How could we improve? And then everyone gets a chance to feed in at the exact moment when we've just stepped off that battlefield. And I think business could learn from that. Far too, we're looking at doing appraisals every 6 months, every year maybe. It's too long.
Yeah.
Let's try and deliver a project. And if it doesn't work out, or it does, we all get together and we all debrief it. And it's a powerful tool, is a hot debrief.
That is a great idea. If you can, I suppose the earlier you get to debrief, the more real and relevant and vibrant it's going to be, rather than, 2 weeks later, or, as you said, after you've cleaned your rifle, had your shower, sat down, decompressed. I suppose it looks and feels different after you've thought about it than when you're in, right in the middle of a firefight, I guess.
Yeah, and it captures the emotion as well. Some people would say, let's calm down, let's have a think about it. No, we want to know what it feels like right now. We want your honest opinion. We don't want a sanitized version that you've had a chance to think about in the shower. We want to know right now, what did we do well? And you know what? Again, those high-performing cultures will, and we'll talk about feedback later, they'll offer feedback because feedback is a gift. And people need to change the perception of feedback and honest conversations. It is a good thing. And so everyone will go around the room, and it'd be quite often someone would say, Mike, I don't think when you did this, I don't think you were clear enough. Or I don't think that was good enough. Or that's not what we agreed we were going to do. And they'll call you out. And because they're doing it to try and help, you take it on board and everybody becomes better. And those cultures are pretty special, mate. When you're in one of those, it's a magical place to be.
Yeah. I think actually you've mentioned feedback, and feedback is going to be the topic of the business surgery today. So I think probably the best thing to do is to do it right now. As you just said, while we're right in the middle of the battle. So every week I ask listeners and viewers to send in their business problems so that myself and my guest can solve them. This week's problem is, as I say, so relevant, and it came from Neil McDonald. Neil said, I'm struggling with giving feedback to my team. Any suggestions? So I'll give my 10 penneth, and then you can give yours. One of the things I picked up when I was running business was from another podcast, and there was like a structure they suggested, and it was very, very simple. And the first question, actually feedback starts with a question, and the first question was, hey, can I give you some feedback? Because if the person isn't in the right mind or the right frame or the right position or the right time to receive that feedback, they won't listen. So it's going to be a yes or a no. If it's a no, let me know when is the best time to do it. And the structure then is, I want to give you some feedback. Step one, describe the behavior. So when you do this, et cetera, et cetera. And step two is this occurs. So the impact of the action. And then we discuss the future behavior. Either, how do you think you can change that action? Or better is to say, nice one, keep it going. And that's one of the main issues of feedback. People often see feedback and think of feedback as a negative, where actually what you should be doing as a leader, as a business owner, is actually looking for opportunities to catch people doing good stuff so that you can give them feedback. And I think the key to that is actually, if you ask yourself, would you like more feedback? Most people would say, yes, I would. So if you want more feedback, then your peers, your staff, your team should and will want more feedback. And I think the key is that structure, and also making sure there's positive feedback as well as negative, but also it should be timely and specific. So do it now. So 6-month appraisals, 3-month appraisals, annual appraisals, waste of time. It should be now. I used to do a one-on-one with my team every single week. And then you can give it, and on top of that, you've got the immediate feedback as well. So that would be my input on that. Mike, what would you say to Neil's problem?
Well, it's a common problem, Neil, I think, and it's a great question. And I agree with you, Phil. I like that structure. I think we've talked about it just before this. Feedback has to be viewed as a gift. It is an opportunity for you to help someone get better. And that's why you're giving them that feedback, because you actually care. If you didn't care about that person, then you won't give them the feedback. You'd say, just do what you want, mate. I'm not that bothered. But I actually really care about you. I think actually what comes before that is real clarity from the leader on the mission that you are on, and as a business and as individuals, and how you all tie into that mission, and the expectations that you have on each and every one of your people. Because unless you've got absolute clarity on that, how the hell can you expect people to know what to do? So it actually comes way before that. And I think there's a big role there for leaders to be a lot more clear. On the battlefield, like I say, that's why you have an order system. There's no grey areas here. Like, we are doing this and you are doing that, and that is it. I'm not suggesting, by the way, that's how business should run, but you get my point. Clarity is key. There's a great, I think it's great to give feedback when it's positive, but there's a great saying in jiu-jitsu as well that in competition, you either win or you learn. So actually, we want to give people feedback when they failed as well, because it's an opportunity. So yeah, I agree with you. I think we could all do a better job at being clearer with our people about what we expect. And also, I might say, when was the last time as a leader you asked for feedback yourself? Tell me how I can be better for you.
Yeah, that's a great extra layer as well. And you've got to be, as a leader, you've got to be open to people saying, hey, Phil, that was crap. I didn't like the way you did that. I think you should have done it this way. And obviously sometimes it's opinion, but you've got to be open to that and go, hold your hands up,
I mean, that's you're the cultural architect of your teams, aren't you, as the leader, quite often. And if you're not living those behaviours, if you're not being the change you want to see, that's the 4 Bs, the fourth one, then how can you possibly expect anyone else to do that? And along with those 4 Bs, I have a 4 Cs system for leadership. And one of the Cs is clarity. I've just talked about that. One is credibility as well. You will lose a lot of credibility if you're not living those values, living those behaviours that you're expecting your team to live as well. So it really does start with you as the leader.
Okay, great stuff. Neil, I hope that gives you some pointers. And if anybody else has got a business problem they would like solving on a future episode by myself and a future guest, drop me an email, phil@leadsbusinesspodcast.com, and hopefully we'll give you a solution. So, Mike, you've just mentioned 2 Cs, so I've got to ask, what are the other 2 Cs?
Well, it was a 3 C system for a long time, but I took some feedback and I changed it to 4. So courage. You've got to have courage to be a leader. Neil needs to have courage to go and have that difficult conversation. It's not easy. You need to have the courage, of course, to say, I ain't got a clue what we're doing. And, I did a talk for a huge business down in the Midlands. And after I was on stage, the CEO was on stage. I just want to ask them about a project. And he genuinely didn't know the answer. And he turned around to 500-600 people and just said, you know what, I'm not sure. And he had the courage to say that. And it was so powerful. So courage, clarity, credibility. We talked about those 2. And then the 4th one was offered to me. And I was on a podcast, a military leaders podcast with an SAS commander, me, and Helen Seymour, who was the first female Typhoon fighter pilot. And I told her about the 3 Cs, and she said, can I offer you a 4th? And it was a great bit of feedback. I took it. And she said, composure. I think all leaders should have composure. There's a great saying in the military that calm is contagious. If you're flapping, if you're shouting around the office, stomping around because, the books aren't balancing or you've lost that project, it will just reverberate into your team. So even though it's going to be tough, take a deep breath, remain composed.
Okay, brilliant. We're 22 minutes in so far, and you're just dropping so much brilliant stuff. This is fantastic. So you're in the Royal Marines. We want to get to the sexy stuff. Tell us how you got into undercover counter-terrorism. Was that the official title? I can't remember.
Well, the official title that I've agreed with my former employer, because I'm not at liberty to tell you the name of the organisation I worked for 15 years, is that was a covert counter-terrorism operations leader within the intelligence and security fields of the Ministry of Defence. So that's a long-winded way of saying the name of an organisation. But ultimately, my job was to keep our country safe, but covertly now. So I'd done 5.5 years in the Marines, 3 operational tours. But the one thing, Phil, I wanted more than anything else in my life was the thing I didn't feel like I had growing up. And that was, and I did have a family, but not the family that I wanted. And I wanted children, but I wanted to continue to serve my country. And so I applied for a role that I thought could provide me with both. And as I was in training to join the Royal Marines when 9/11 happened, I was in training in the Ministry of Defence when 7/7, the London bombings happened. In fact, I was on the tube that morning. And again, I was thrust into the busiest period of defence we'd ever experienced. And we've never experienced anything like it in the mid-2000s. And I was following terrorists around, and then I was running agents, working undercover, and just trying to keep our country safe, mate. And I did that for 15 years, a wonderful career, loved it, had a huge impact on public safety, and I'm really, really proud of it.
Okay. There's a million questions I could ask you after that 2 minutes.
I can't answer any of them.
So you were, just to summarise then, so you were undercover stopping the bad guys.
I was working covertly, and I have to be really careful here. I hope your listeners understand.
No, I appreciate
I, as a patriot for 20 years, I know it's the sexy stuff, and I know there's a million questions that you could ask, and I would want to answer, because I do think there are some really unique insights from that world that could help a lot of people. And I'm navigating that at the moment. I'm trying to find a way to tell my story. Like as you know, I speak professionally for businesses all around Europe, and I try and tread this path very carefully and share as much as I can. But what people want to ask is about the operations, and I can't speak to that because I'm a patriot and some of those operations are ongoing. What I would say is I can assure people that the capability that we have in the UK, having worked overseas with all our partner agencies, is world class. And there was a lot of bad stuff happening, and probably is still happening, that we don't get to hear about, but those people are out there every single day in the shadows, keeping us safe. And sorry, I can't answer any more, I'm afraid, mate. But it was a wonderful career, 20 years, served our country for half my entire life, and extremely proud about it.
Okay, you mentioned some unique pointers that you learned while you were covert. What lessons did you learn there that are relevant to our listeners as business owners and business operators?
Again, it's all the things I've talked about. So those 4 C's and the 4 B's, these are all learnings that I've distilled from that 20 years operational experience. One thing I think is worth highlighting is that when we're talking about operational work, we're talking about the battlefield, and that could be in Iraq, that could be on the streets of London, that could be, wherever, not the boardroom. So I'd like to think that those lessons are, I don't profess to be right. I don't profess to have all the answers, but they've absolutely worked for me. I think you can't underestimate the power of team and diverse teams, particularly in my old world. We want people from a rich variety of backgrounds. That's what makes teams really, really special. But the thing that connects them is the glue that comes through unselfish behaviours and through a really aligned and powerful mission. And I think businesses can learn a lot from that. I often tell a story about, and I won't bore you to death today, about Hyatt Denim. I'm wearing a pair of their jeans now. They were founded in 2012, and to replace the 4,000 jobs that were lost in the denim industry in Wales. And there are only 40 people in. But their mission isn't to make amazing jeans. It's so that this town will make jeans again. And if as business leaders, we thought a little bit more deeply about our mission and what that actually means to our people, to our customers, I think that's the one thing that the MOD and the military did really well. Everyone understood the mission. It was quite simple. We were keeping people safe. And everyone knew the role that they were playing. Even if you were a tiny cog in that intelligence machine, you knew that the thing that you were delivering was contributing directly to that mission. And quite often, I think in business, particularly as businesses scale, it's very hard to keep the alignment of all those people pointing in the right direction. And that is a real difficult task. But it's a vital task, because if we can keep everyone aligned, magic happens. And I've done some work with Leeds Rhinos recently, and I always talk about trust. And you're in a line of 13 men, opposition's running at you. If I'm thinking about what's happening left and right of me, if I don't trust these individuals are going to do their jobs, I'm not focusing on what I'm supposed to be doing. And so trust, again, plays a huge part in creating that high performance culture. And we need to find that in our businesses.
That is so true. And explaining it like that, if everybody's doing their job to the best they can, and you trust that everybody else in the team is doing the best they can, A, like you say, magic happens, and B, you just concentrate on you rather than even if I get this project in on time, I know, Mary down the road or John over on that desk hasn't done his bit. So why the fuck should I do my bit? And that's when it all falls apart, doesn't it?
Yeah, there's a great saying by an American general. It's very, very simple, but it's so true. And that is, trust is tempo. Trust is tempo. If you've got trust, you can move quick. And you need to move quick on the battlefield when the bullets are coming in, let me tell you. You can't be second guessing anybody. It's the same in business as well. Trust people, but trust only happens when we have unselfish behaviours and when we have a community of people, not a crowd. So it's vitally important that we get that right. And if we get it, then honestly, it's magic, and you'll truly find high performance in your teams.
Okay. So we can't talk about anything you've done. So
Sorry.
all these really exciting, really fascinating things we all want to hear about. I can't ask you any questions about it at all. So you leave this really, really exciting, sort of dopamine fueled, exciting, amazing, really important job. That must have been a weird come down, like going out into Civvie Street and going, you must have gone, what the fuck do I do now?
Yeah, but it was my decision. And I have a motto that you should live a life without limits. And I got to the 20-year point. I was 40 years old. Lockdown was just starting to happen. COVID was just starting to happen. And I took a moment to think to myself, and I thought, and I was offered another 20 years, right? Like great pension, secure job, purpose, fulfillment, all that good stuff. And 99% of people would take that, particularly going into COVID, right? I resigned. I left because I wanted to see what it'd be like to go out there on my own and try. And there was people like you, Phil, friends of mine who'd started their own businesses, and I admired them. I admired the risk that they'd taken. I loved this idea of creating something from nothing. I wanted to see if I could take the learnings that I'd gathered in that 20-year career and put it into business and see if it would work. And I also wanted to raise a lot of money for Leeds Hospital's charity. And unfortunately, when you're in the world that I was in, I wasn't allowed a social media account, wasn't allowed my picture online, wasn't allowed my name online. And if you're trying to raise a lot of money for charity, you need to promote it. And so ultimately, I was given an ultimatum by my former employer. Forget the idea of raising this money and choose the job, and they never expected me to write that letter of resignation. But sometimes in life, you just got to back yourself. And I wrote it, and I walked in, and it was the best thing I've ever done. Okay.
What was the driver to raising the money for Leeds Hospital?
So both my boys were born early. My eldest lad was 5 weeks prem. He was about 4.5 pounds. We had to feed him through a tube for a week. He was in hospital for a few weeks. And then 10 months later, our youngest boy was born. He was 9 weeks prem, 3 pound, see-through, couldn't breathe for himself, emergency cesarean. He was on life support for 3 days. In and out of special care intensive care for 6 weeks. Got him home. He was sleeping loads. I remember saying to my wife, this is good. He's catching up. He's sleeping. And as we all know, you never question a mother's instinct. And Sarah turned around to me and she said, I've just got a funny feeling there's not just something up here. So I went off to follow a terrorist around all day, like you do. And she took him into A&E. And I got a call an hour later. So you've got to come straight back. And the consultant told us that if we hadn't brought him in that day, he wouldn't have made it till tomorrow. He had meningitis. So back into intensive care again, another 6 weeks. And it was the experience, Phil, of being in Leeds General Infirmary for all that time that taught me that the equipment, the staff, the facilities that we all take for granted are not purchased by the NHS. The specialist care and equipment is purchased by charities. And what they also don't tell you is when you've been through an experience like that and you've seen your child fight for their lives, and quite often would get called to say, you might not make it today, or you need to come straight back if we'd gone out for a break or whatever. It leaves a mark on you, mate. And I carried an unlocked box of trauma around with me for about 10 years. And at the time I decided to raise this money, I just felt I needed to repay the debt that I felt I owed to that hospital and to that staff. So it was all driven to give back. I set off with a target of raising 70 grand for the neonatal unit. We actually raised £137,000. And it was locked down, no one had any money. So I thought, I've got to find something that no one does. That's mental. And I discovered ocean rowing. So I rowed across the Atlantic solo, 3,000 miles on my own, unsupported. Became the fastest British person to do that race. And we raised a lot of money. So very, very proud of it. It was the right decision to leave the MOD.
Right. So you just drop that in, I've just rowed across the Atlantic on my own, the fastest person to do it. I mean, that's, for somebody who's done a load of mental stuff, Mike, that is mental. Why did you...
Well, look, it was difficult. 4 million oar strokes, 46 days, 6 hours and 10 minutes alone, didn't see another person. People always say, oh, there must have been a boat following you. Like, I didn't see anyone for 46 days. And that was the hardest thing. The physical side of that, the sleep deprivation, I was rowing anywhere between 14 to 17 hours a day, sleeping for maybe 4 hours broken on a night, eating rations. That was tough enough, right? But the feeling of loneliness was debilitating. I said to my wife, Sarah, I've been on operations. I said, I'll call you twice a week, love. I'm going to get on with it, enjoy the solitude, all that kind of good stuff, disconnect from the noise. I called her twice a day, every day, crying my eyes out. And I was just completely alone. And it comes back to the point I made about community. The ocean taught me a lot. It taught me that nothing good happens alone. Yeah, it was a solo row, mate, but it was most definitely a team effort. I had coaches, I had supporters, I had donations, and I made sure I said that on stage in Antigua. But that feeling of loneliness is something that I'll never forget. And really the connection between us and other people, these kind of conversations we're having today, the things that your listeners are listening to, the people sat within our offices, that's life, man. And when that's taken away from you, you have nothing. And there's people who listen to this who'll go, no, I reckon I could do it for a bit. No, you can't. You can't do it. And I thought it was a bit like going to prison. I thought, I'll be like a nautical solitary confinement. And then I realized after about 24 hours that even prisoners in solitary confinement get fed 3 times a day and they see a guard. I saw nobody. And so what happened was I started to try and connect. And this wasn't a conscious thought. I tried to connect to anything that I felt I could connect to. So I was having conversations with fish, the birds, the moon, the stars, anything just to try and be a human again. And it was a really, really powerful lesson, mate. Nothing good happens alone, and you can't do anything on your own.
Just amazing, just absolutely amazing. So you were just in the sea, in a boat, rowing, and just that's it. Nothing.
That's it.
No support vessel, nobody around you, nothing.
No, didn't see anybody. Closer to someone on the International Space Station than I was to someone on land in the middle. 1,500 miles from land, right in the middle of the Atlantic. It's 4 miles deep. I had to get out every 5 days and clean the bottom of the boat. So you're jumping into, you're tied onto a line, obviously, but you're swimming underneath the boat 4 miles deep. There's marlin there, there's sharks, and all sorts of stuff. It's pretty scary, but I was the fastest British person in history to complete the Talisker Whiskey Atlantic challenge, purely and simply because I was so desperate to see my family again. It wasn't. I mean, I'm 5'8". I'm not built. I'm 44. I'm not built for rowing. I'm no Olympian, but I just rowed more than anybody else because when everyone else was resting, and there's a picture of me getting off the boat, and if you look at my torso, there are thick white lines where the sun never saw that part of my skin because I never stood up, I never laid down, I was sat rowing. And when I got to Antigua, I couldn't stand up straight, I couldn't lay down straight for a week, I couldn't open my hands, I couldn't close my hands. I was an absolute mess. But I just needed to see my family again, mate, so I just put it all in.
That is unbelievable, unbelievable. And obviously, Mike, you wouldn't do anything as stupid as that again, would you?
I swore I'd never row an ocean again after that experience. I do have. I tell you what it is, Phil, and it's a leading question there. But when you've seen the difference that you can make, and look, I raised a drop in the ocean compared to some people, 137,000 quid. Gave 60 grand to the neonatal unit that looked after Gabriel. Gave 50 grand to Rob Burrows' M&D appeal, and 22 grand to a general pot. But my friend Kevin Sinfield, as many people will know, has raised multiple millions. And when you see the difference that people can make through self-sacrifice, there's something that compels you to do it again, because I do believe that that is the real currency in life. We can build huge businesses. We can make millions. We can have a house in Marbella and a Ferrari, whatever. None of it matters. What really matters is helping other people. And that kind of eulogy virtue versus the kind of resume virtue that people talk about. Like, what do you want to be remembered about for when you're on your deathbed? Well, for me, I don't care. No one's going to care how big my business is. I want them to say he was a good man. I want him to say he helped other people. He sacrificed for others. So to answer your question, I will be running Ocean again, maybe 2. It's a 4-year project. I can't announce it yet. This is the worst podcast ever. I can't answer any questions. I can't announce it yet because we're going to announce it on the BBC. But there's a man's name I mentioned in there somewhere that I might be doing it with, and we're gonna do something really special for MND. Really, really special, mate. So that's an exclusive for your podcast.
Well, when you announce it, come back and tell me as well. We'll have it on specially. So you've done all these really dull things. So, for most people, opening a business is like the most exciting thing they've ever done. For you, it must be like piece of piss, So why did you decide to open your own business?
Honestly, because I wanted to create a community for people to come back to after COVID. That was the driving force behind Gracie Bar Around the Jiu-Jitsu Academy on Street Lane, above the Olive Branch. Most people don't know where that is. I trained Jiu-Jitsu since 2001 before I went to Afghanistan. It was something that, because we knew we were going into the caves, Taliban caves, so we had to be able to fight with our bare hands. But it wasn't about teaching people to defend themselves. It was about creating a community. And again, the lessons I'd learned from the military of shared adversity, overcoming hardship alongside others, is so powerful in building connection and friendship and confidence and self-discipline. So you said at the very beginning, it's a small Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu academy. It is, but in relative terms, it's the largest in the north of England. Most Jiu-Jitsu academies have about 150 students. We have 550 students training every single week, age 3 to 63. And it's just a wonderful thing. And I'm very proud of it. I'm really proud that I started it and exited it in 2 years to go row the ocean. So I've got a great team. I'm still involved, but I've got a great team who run it for me. And then that allowed me the space to go on to found other businesses as well. So really proud of it. I want to open a few more, but for now, that's the thing I'm focused on. Okay.
As you're a trained killer, I have to apologise for calling it a small business because I know you know where I live. I'm only around the corner from you.
It is a small business. You know what, Phil? But I'm really proud of it, mate. And one thing I've learned in business, and this will probably make complete sense to you, but it was a revelation to me. We made way more money as a business when we were smaller, but scaling out quite quickly to the scale that we're at, and the infrastructure required to, it's been a real lesson for me. The infrastructure required to sustain that scale is a headache, to put it bluntly.
Yeah. That was actually going to be my next question. What have you learned from running a business?
Loads of things. Initially, I learned that the order system of the military, whilst extremely powerful, does not work in business. So you must be way more flexible. You must, and all those 4Bs and 4Cs come from that experience as well of running business. I've learned that big isn't better financially. Quite often it's an ego thing. I want to have the biggest academy in the north of England. Guess what? You make half as much money as you did when it was really lean and it was easy to manage and there's way more headaches. What else have I learned? I've learned that having that really powerful mission. I always say we're a community first project. So the mission is to bring people together. And that has, 550 people there, right? Round the corner from my house. None of them knew each other before we opened up. And so one of my proudest moments was sat in the academy. We have a load of community events that we do to bring people together. I was just watching people. And I thought, of all the things that I've done in my life, this might be the thing I'm most proud of, because by creating that business, I was able to connect people after a really challenging time. And that's something that they'll have forever now, those friendships. And that is something I'm really proud of, mate.
There'll be detail if anybody wants to, and you do it, I assume you do it from beginners to do jiu-jitsu have black belts? Am I right with that?
I got my black belt in 2017. It's not like a Far Eastern martial art where you have 11-year-old black belts. Like, that doesn't exist. It's way more, it's way better than that. 3 years old to 63, absolute novices all the way through to my level and beyond.
Okay, so if anybody wants to join, there will be details in the show notes. Now, every week we ask our guests to give us a how-to. Mike could tell us how to kill a man, but he's not allowed to tell us that. So tell us what, and it's not probably business relevant either. It might be for certain businesses. It might be for certain business. We're going way off track here. Stop it, Mike. So, Mike, tell us what your how-to is going to be, and tell us how to do it.
So my how-to this week. So the question I get asked the most when I speak on stage is, like, how do you deal with that 40-foot wave in the dead of night on the Atlantic? How do you deal with the Taliban waiting for you in Afghanistan? How do you deal with that agent who perhaps wants to kill you or whatever? And the truth of the matter is, Phil, that you don't know how you're going to deal with it. The thing that gets you through those moments, I believe, is self-belief. And so my how-to this week is how to build unbreakable self-belief, because that is the thing that is going to make the difference when your business fails, or your partner leaves you, or there's a health crisis in your family, or whatever. You need to believe that you're able to overcome it. And so my how-to is this. I call it my wall of evidence. You're not born with self-belief. You can't listen to this podcast and just have it. You can't read a book and it can't teach you how to have it. It's got to be crafted through years and years of countless tiny incremental goals that you've set for yourself. So every time you set a goal for yourself, it doesn't need to be rowing across the Atlantic. This might be making your bed in the morning. This might be tidying your desk. But you set yourself that goal and you walk that path, the path between you now and the better version of you that you want to see. Every time you walk that path, and by the way, you don't need to be successful on that path. Let's say you set yourself a goal of losing 2 stone. You don't need to be successful, but at least you've given it your best shot. Every time you do that, you place a brick in the wall. You do it again and again. Another goal, another brick in the wall, again. And this wall of evidence grows higher and higher and higher. It becomes a fortress of self-belief. So when you face that 40-foot wave in the dead of night, when you face the Taliban waiting for you in Afghanistan, when your business fails and you're not sure if you've got what it takes to pull through, you can have a quick glance behind you and you can see this wall of evidence. The evidence of those years and years of just pushing yourself that a little bit further every single time. That is what will give you the strength to succeed. It's self-belief, not confidence. And you need evidence to show you can do that. So that's my wall of evidence system, how to create unbreakable self-belief.
Love it. Absolutely love it. That's fantastic, Mike. So anybody who wants to build their self-belief, start building that wall. Okay, before we finish, we ask every guest to give us a shout out to the Leeds business. But before we do, I've got, what have I got this week? I've got 3 shout outs. A few weeks ago, I attended the Lifted Ventures conference hosted by Helen Oldham and Jordan Darg, both who have been guests on the show. So give their episodes a listen. And as part of it, I gave out Leeds Business Podcast biscuits, and everybody who took a photo of themselves with their biscuit and posted on LinkedIn was guaranteed a shout out. So this week's thank you shout outs go to Andrea Edmondson, who's an executive brain coach. Sounds good, Andrea. Sam Gardner, who works at Enterprise Works at York University, and Alina Faith Cameron, who's from Innovate UK. Thanks, guys. And there's your shout out. So, Mike, who are you going to give a shout out to? Well,
I could have given a shout out to the Biscuitery, who make amazing biscuits in Leeds, personalised ones. They're worth checking out. But I want to give a shout out to an unsung hero on Street Lane, I think, and that is Rand Coffee Roastery. So in the age of, commercialised coffee, this independent stands alone, I think, and has become, again, a hub for people to connect. And every morning on our dog walk, me and my wife go get a coffee, and we enjoy that every morning. It's a bit of a ritual for us. So I'll give a shout out to Mr. Rand and Rand Coffee Roastery on Street Lane. Wonderful business, small, but very, very well done.
Yep, I know Rand. I know it very well. So there will be a link to their website, and I'll probably put their address in as well. But it's pretty much opposite you, isn't it? Is it sort of diagonally opposite you?
Yeah, just down the road.
Yeah. Okay.
Next to Pizza Express.
Anybody on North Leeds will know Pizza Express on Street Lane. Mike, it has been absolutely fascinating. Despite you not answering half my questions, it has just been the most brilliant educational episode we've ever had. Thank you so much for coming on.
Phil, it's an absolute pleasure. I know you're going to put my website on the show notes. I'd encourage everyone. We didn't get a chance to speak about Next 45, so please head there and have a look at that. That's something I'm running at the moment, which is a lovely business aimed at trying to help men navigate midlife. So please check that out as well.
Okay. All right. I'll give you a chance to do it. Give me 3 minutes on NX.
So NXT45, this is my kind of passion project. There's a silent men's health crisis going on right now. 3 out of 4 people who kill themselves are men. This was last year. It's now 4 out of 5 within a year. 1 in 8 men has a mental health challenge, yet paradoxically, we're the least likely to ask for help. Guys just aren't vulnerable enough because we feel shame when we feel like we need to ask for help. And I'm here shouting out from the rooftop saying, fellas, the greatest act of courage you can ever have is to show your vulnerable side. So we created a business called NXT45. It runs a flagship event every year in September. 100 men in a field, no booze, no bullshit. Yoga, ice baths, speakers, fire-cooked food. It's amazing. Check it out, nxt45.com. Trying to shift the dial on men's health. And again, Phil, it goes back to this point I made, mate. My life's purpose is helping people, serving our country, changing the situation around men's health, bringing people back together, raising money, coming on podcasts like this.
Great stuff. And there will be a link to that in the show notes as well. Mike, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for listening to this episode. I hope you found it interesting, inspiring, and of use. To make sure you don't miss out on any future episodes, please subscribe to the show. Go on, do it now. Do it now before you go off and do something else. Thank you. Much appreciated. Oh, and don't forget our fair deal. See you next week.